What's going on, football fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with a Thursday night football preview for the Jaguars versus the Saints. Gonna go through what you need to know for DFS on Thursday, as well as a few props on Underdog and on Prize Picks that I'm getting to for my exposure that you might want to add to a few slips of yourselves. So a lot to get into here. Let's go ahead and start it off with a look at the DFS slate on Draftkings. Unlike a few of the recent primetime matchups, we've got ourselves a pretty closely competitive matchup here. We've got just a 1-point spread favoring the home team and a Jaguars team that was extremely impressive against the Bills, going against one of the better defenses in all of the league in the New Orleans Saints. A game where I expect there to be a lot of defense played. Both teams, I think, criminally underrated on that side of the ball, and that includes the Jaguars that have had quite a nasty pass rush this year. So at just a 40-point total, I think we might see this game shade towards the under, which instead of going out there playing like onslaught scripts for one team or the other, I think the way that I'm going to attack this is more with the low scoring kind of approach, perhaps taking more kickers, more PPR upside sort of wide receivers, maybe receiving kind of backs like an Alvin Kamara, right, are a little bit more attractive in that kind of game, because when you have two defenses that are as stout as, I see here, I don't think you're going to see a ton of scoring, right? I don't think you're going to see a bunch of huge plays, 50, 60 points scored there, which might be a contrarian way to get to this sort of game. So rather than focusing on the Trevor Lawrences of the world, right, prioritizing Derek Carr as a buyback, I'm much more intrigued by Olave, right, who has a ton of PPR upside. Christian Kirk, who without somebody like Zay Jones has a ton of PPR upside. You could say the same thing for Calvin Ridley, of course. Those kind of players, maybe even without using their quarterbacks, is a contrarian way to attack the slate, right? Because if you're just looking on paper at these two teams, if they were playing half-assed defenses, Trevor Lawrence would be nearly a must-play, right? At just an $8,800 price tag, Derek Carr would be a borderline must-play. But if you think it's more of a slog out there, and I know it's in a dome, right? There's not going to be any sort of weather conditions that add to the slog. Maybe the defenses just show out, right? So, pick your narrative, right? Whether it's an onslaught for one team or the other. Maybe you're going with the low score slog fest like I am out there for your leverage. Just pick a script and, build lineups around that, right? Correlate everything to that script. So if, Thursday night, your script ends up hitting, you're going to win for a lot of money, right? Rather than just taking random shots in the dark. Now let's go player by player, talk through some of the guys you might want to prioritize in certain scripts over another. Alvin Kamara is pretty much script proof, right? $10,400. I think it's a fair price tag as well, right? A lot of times our most expensive player can be $11,000 plus on a showdown slate. That's not the case with Alvin Kamara, and I like him in PPR scripts. Of course, if they're going to score a lot of points, he's the main red zone target for the Saints. You can say the same thing about Travis Etienne Jr. too. So I think both running backs, pretty much regardless of the script that you're entering, are going to be attractive as either main, captain options perhaps, as some of your onslaught scripts, or even as buybacks, right? If you're going with a Jaguars heavy script, you do think that they're going to score like 25 to 30 points, but you can still use Alvin Kamara as a buyback, right? You're going to have enough salary for it. Pricing is extremely soft for the showdown slate. So if you want to afford a premium option like Kamara, and I know like most time running backs as buybacks, right, are a horrible idea. Not so much when he has as much receiving upside as an Alvin Kamara does. So I think both running backs are really intriguing options, and in my low scoring script are going to be headliners, right? It's probably the two highest owned players I have out of the entire slate. Both quarterbacks are okay plays. I think the price tag is fair on both, but unfortunately with the script that I'm running, I'm not going to have many lineups that have two quarterbacks in them, right? If you're using two quarterbacks, it means you want at least one pass catcher from each team, which is starting to get you into those chalky kind of builds, what I think are going to be extremely overutilized for Thursday's matchup, which is what I'm trying to stay away from, right? I'm trying to build a script that I think is more likely to hit in the slogfest, but also a script that's lower owned from the game theory perspective. A lot of people, when they watch these primetime matchups, are just hoping for a blowout. I shouldn't say they're hoping against a blowout, right? They're hoping that it's going to be a shootout kind of game environment was the word that I was looking for before. But yeah, they're hoping for the best case scenario, right? They want an entertaining game to watch, especially when it's an island game with so many eyes on it. And unfortunately for us, we see it just time and time again, right? These primetime games normally don't live up to the billing, either because of scoring being low or because one team just doesn't bring it, for any given slate. So just know that these quarterbacks are kind of dependent on this being a close shootout. And that's not going to hit every single time. So, the quarterbacks I think are fine to throw into, lineups, but I'm going to avoid using them together for the most part. Chris Olave was questionable until this morning, but he has cleared that injury designation, so he should be good to go. Has played throughout the injury, so it's not like we were worried about him actually suiting up. Both these wide receivers for Jacksonville have a little bit more value now that we know that Zay Jones has been ruled out. Michael Thomas, decent price tag at $7,000. I have to say, in terms of points per dollar, right, one of the better spend up options that you can get to. Evan Ingram, same thing, 1.8x points per dollar, which is pretty solid for a $5,800 player. Rashid Shaheed, I think, is one of the more underrated players on this slate. Has not only proven to be a deep play threat, but is now becoming just more of a regular part of the offense, right? He's starting to play more snaps for the Saints. Derek Carr is starting to look his way a lot more often because he's not just, that deep play wide receiver, right? That has that blazing speed to take the top off a defense. He's proven to be a pretty decent route runner, right? And he's young, he's raw, he's learning the position, and you can see Derek Carr getting more and more comfortable with him. In fact, there are plays where you've heard him, I know they had the NFL audio people out there and they caught, on a live mic him saying, I'm just going to throw it to Shaheed down the field. When you have that kind of confidence from your quarterback, right, that is just going to grow and foster to even more production towards the end of the year. So I'm very high on his prospects in general. In dynasty leagues, I have a ton of Shaheed. He's a player that I've actively looked to trade for, right, in those kind of leagues. And for Showdown, $5,000, I think he brings some upside to the table too, right? If he gets one of those long touchdowns, he's in the optimal lineup, right, based on that one play alone, let alone the other kind of pieces of production that he'll give you. Defenses, if I'm looking at a slog fest, right, they're going to be especially intriguing. So, Saints are $5,400, but the Jaguars are only $3,800. So they have to do a lot less to hit, right, than a Saints defense to get there. So I like both of them, but the Jaguars defense, you're also going to be looking at super low ownership. Speaking of, guys, everything over here on the black is posted on my Patreon page. So if you're wondering how to get access to all of the projections that I offer, not just what I show here on the videos, well, check it out down in the description of this video. I have my projected points over there, my projected ownership for every player, and all the different player pool notes that I'm posting on a slate by slate basis. I cover the main slate, also Showdown over there for all the island games, and you can see we've got my player pool over there, whether they're a core play for me, a different kind of scripts, right, that I'm running certain players in, things that you should keep in mind, right, when using certain players, and then a whole player notes tab, which is like pretty much like whole paragraph long explanations of how to use certain players that are a little bit harder to get a read on. So there's a lot of info over there. It takes me a lot of time to put the spreadsheet together. Honestly, even longer than it takes me to put together my lineups, because I want to make sure that you have all the info that I'm working off of to go out there and build your own lineups, right? Because a lot of people just post their exposure, they'll post their projections, and that'll be the end of it. You don't want to just copy and paste another person's process, right? You want to take bits and parts of it that you agree with and incorporate it into your own, right? You should always have the utmost control over your own process, right? You should never be blindly tailing anyone else. So the point of me putting out all that info, right, is so that you can pick and choose what you agree with, right? Because there may be takes I have on, how I'm using a certain player in a script that you don't agree with, right? So that's why I put out all that extra info, so you're not just blindly out there tailing someone's picks, right? That's never the idea with my picks, and really shouldn't be the idea, I don't think, with anyone's picks out there, right? If you're doing that, first off, shouldn't be any fun, right? You want to have some sort of control over your process, but also you're playing against the same sort of people in GPPs, right? So you're only going to be as good as they are. Make sure that you can get a step up on their process and learn how to play the game yourself. So check out the Patreon if that sounds like it's up your alley. Has all the different tools that I'm using to build my lineups on there to speed up your process, give you some of that insight into what I'm thinking, and build your own process. So check it out down below. But yeah, Shaheed on there, in terms of ownership, I do think that he's going to be pretty chalky this week. I'm going to end up running my first set of ownership, but I think it's going to be well warranted. He's grown into that role. He's cheap enough at this point that I think he opens up quite a bit of value. In terms of pure punt plays, it's worth noting Zay Jones is out, right? So he's not going to be in the player pool this week. But a few options to choose from. I think my favorite might be Ben Strange, a player that's a backup tight end for the Jaguars, but does see quite a few snaps. Jamal Agnew's always due for a long play, right? When he gets the ball, it's normally for like 30, 40-yard plays, whether it's a 30-yard rush on an end around, whether it's like a 30, 40-yard bomb down the field. When Jamal Agnew gets the ball in his hands, normally really good things happen, which is, at $400, brings a lot of upside to the table. Outside of that, though, if Juwan Johnson ends up playing by some miracle, he is expected to be out, so I wouldn't be counting on it all that much. He would be insane value at $200. But mostly we're looking at guys like Agnew as pure flyers. I got him projected for 4 points because of that big play upside. You can look at backup running back Kendre Miller, right? He'll probably get at least 5, maybe 10 touches in this game. I think it's Saints-heavy scripts. You would even more so when I consider Miller, as there'd be a lot more rushing touches to go around. You could take a look at Foster Moreau. I do think he's a little bit overpriced now, though. He was like $1,200 for a showdown slate a few weeks ago. And then outside of that, guys, it's a lot of balanced builds, right? The pricing is super soft up top. So it's not like we're going to need a bunch of $200 players or like even $1,500 players in our player pool. A lot of times we're rounding out our lineups with somebody like maybe a Jags D, maybe one of the kickers down here in the 4 and 5K range. There's just not a lot of guys that you have to spend up for here. So that's how I'm attacking the slate. Again, I'm looking for more of the PPR upside kind of guys. Because I'm looking more at a slogfest, kickers, defenses, and probably going to be underweight on some of these quarterbacks as a result. It's just how I'm attacking the slate. You need to pick your narrative and go with it and find a way to correlate your player pool with that narrative that you choose. And now for some props on Underdog. So first off, we got Rashid Shaheed over 2.5 receptions. You already heard how much I expect to see from him this week, how he's gotten more comfortable in the offense. But on top of that is minus 125 on Draftkings for the over. Over on Caesars is minus 130 towards the over at 2.5 receptions. And in general, I think as we get closer to lock, you might see this juice even more in that direction. People are going to look at some of the usage rates. They're going to look at some of the tape, figure out that Shaheed is a legit wide receiver now, and not just this gadget player that plays like 10-15% of snaps like you saw there in 2022, right? He's playing closer to 50%, sometimes even like 65-70% plus of snaps for them, and I think that's just going to grow as the season goes on. So 2.5 receptions, I see a lot of value there, and you're also locking in some value compared to the sportsbook odds. And then over with Travis Etienne Jr., so Etienne, as some people will call him, he's at 66.5 rushing yards over there on FanDuel, and he's minus 130 over this on DraftKings. So not only do you have both main books, calling for him to be value, you also have a player that without we didn't talk much about T-Law potentially being out, and he's expected to play, but if he were to be out, they're really going to lean on the rushing game. And the number one player in the NFL when it comes to touches at this point is Travis Etienne Jr., right? He has more touches than anyone else out there. So if he ends up being the player that has to carry this offense, he could be bumped up, and they would be, probably drop to like 4-point underdogs at that point, maybe even like 6.5-point underdogs without Trevor Lawrence. His rushing prop's probably going to go up, right? Because they're not going to lean on the passing game without Trevor Lawrence, their best offensive player. They're going to give it to the guy who's gotten the ball more than anyone else in the NFL, right? And if you're going to count on a rushing yard prop, you want it to be on the biggest bell cow of any player in the NFL, and that is exactly what Etienne has been. So both of these, plus EV props if you're comparing to the sportsbook odds, but also make plenty of sense considering what we might see there on Thursday. Over on Prize Picks, they don't have the same Shaheed prop, but still I do like his over at 34.5 receiving yards, and they also do have the same ETM prop at 63.5 yards. So I prefer the value on Underdog. If I had to choose between the two slips, I would definitely enter that one. But if you're somebody that only plays on Prize Picks or wants to get more exposure, feel free to go ahead and mix this one in as well, right? It's the same kind of payout. Half the props are the same, and frankly, if Shaheed's going to get 3 catches, you'd expect one of them to probably be a big play, so I'm not all that worried about the receiving yard prop side. So, alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the Thursday Night Football preview. Before you hopping out of here, go ahead, smash that like button for me, and also comment down below who you've got as your top captain play on the slate. If you can go ahead, get the player right, and give me an idea of their projected points, go ahead and win yourself a free month of the Patreon. All you have to do is get the correct captain right? Your optimal captain in the large field GPP, and also their point total within 5 points, right? So give me that name down below. Also give me that projection, and let's go out there and have ourselves a night. I appreciate all the support here, guys. Best of luck in those large field GPPs. For access to all the projections you saw in the video, also all the different prop slips that I'm entering, make sure to check out my Patreon. There's a link down below. On there, you can get access to all of that data, all of those different tools to help you out with your process. I appreciate the support here, guys. Best of luck, and I'll catch you guys for the previews throughout the weekend.